Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha, Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into Ezekiel, the 26th chapter. And in Ezekiel chapter 26, 27, 28, these main chapters pretty much go into speaking about the Tyre, okay, and I think at some point it mentioned Sidon. Okay, it talks about the Prince of Tyrus and all of that in there, which there are certain parts that you'll read which are actually symbolic for Esau Edom today. Okay, when you read those certain chapters or certain precepts, okay, but there are also certain parts that actually did happen historically. Okay, so we're going to go into Ezekiel chapter 26, dealing with when the Lord actually brought the Babylonians against the actual city of Tyrus during this time period. Okay, so this is the book of Ezekiel chapter 26. It says here, judgment on Tyre, or Tyre, as some pronounce it. And it came to pass in the 11th year, in the first day of the month, that the word of the Lord Yahweh came unto me, saying, Son of man, because that Tyrus hath said against Jerusalem, Aha, she is broken, that was the gates of the people. She is turned unto me, I shall be replenished. Now she is laid waste. Now, when you deal with, like for example, even the previous chapter, the Lord was pronouncing judgment against the neighboring nations because of their mocking and mainly the mocking and coming against us when we went into captivity, when we fell to Babylon. Now, dealing with Tyrus, that when you actually look it up in the ancient world, say ancient Tyrus. This was actually a island. Okay, when you actually zoom in, it was a coastal island. So when you actually look it up, I believe the distance was about half a mile or so away from the mainland. But you had this right here. You had as it says here, the new island city of Tyrus, which was right here. And so in order to actually get to this small island city of Tyrus, you had to actually cross a distance on water. Okay, but they were known also as a merchant, like a merchant city, and so on and so forth. So when you actually deal with Jerusalem or Israel, for example, around the time of King Solomon, as the nation was flourishing and all of those good things were happening, Solomon had pretty much established Jerusalem as a very wealthy and mainly known city. And so there was actually a lot of trade, okay, that was happening within that region, where people would come there and trade and do all sorts of good things, okay, because Solomon had sort of established that at that time. So it wasn't just that he was like he built a huge mansion and built a temple of the Lord, but he also established Jerusalem as a main city where trading was also happening as well. So what Tyrus is saying here is, now, right, she is broken, that was the gates of the people. So now that Jerusalem is broken, all right, which was known for basically where everybody would know and go to, and the merchants will come there and all of these things. Now that she's gone, right, she is turned on to me, I shall be replenished. So now, because Tyrus was also one of those known merchant cities, they were known for trading and so on and so forth. So they were basically saying, well, now that Jerusalem ain't there no more, now I'm going to pretty much I'm going to grow. I'm not going to be in their shadow anymore or anything to that extent. Okay, now that she is laid waste. Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I am against thee, O Tyrus, and will cause many nations to come up against thee, as the sea causeth his waves to come up. Which, when you deal with the history of Tyrus, you had Nebuchadnezzar that came against them, right? The siege of Tyre or Tyre, around the 5 something BC, not too long from when Jerusalem fell. But a period of time after that, you also had the Greeks, all right, led by Alexander, which also came against them. Okay, and also in times past after that, if you keep on looking, you had other nations that came up against them. Okay, but primarily, as we're going to read on down here, it starts off talking about when Nebuchadnezzar came against them. Verse 4 says, "And they shall destroy the walls of Tyrus and break down her towers. I will also scrape her dust from her and make her like the top of a rock." Meaning the Lord is going to make it bare. Okay, meaning when he brings these nations against them, eventually they're going to end up desolate. They're going to lose the status. They're going to lose that position that they were in, and they're going to be brought low. "It shall be a place for the spreading of nets in the midst of the sea." The spreading of nets meaning like where fishermen, if you look at in the ancient world, for example, how fishermen didn't necessarily always have a fishing hook, and a fishing stick that you would go with today, like to catch fish. Most of the time they would use a net. When you throw your net into the water and you catch all that fish and all that good stuff, sometimes your net might rip. You might need to mend it, but you need to take care of your net. And those nets were heavy too. But getting that net out of the water, eventually they would have to dry it. So sometimes they might hang it on like some high area, or in most cases they would spread it upon a rock, like a big enough rock, so that it can just dry. So the Lord was saying here, metaphorically, that he was going to turn this city of Tyrus into like this bare giant rock that's just in the midst of the water, in the midst of the Mediterranean, which is just metaphorical. Okay, so it says here, "For I have spoken it, saith the Lord Yahweh, and it shall become a spoil to the nations. And her daughters which are in the field shall be slain by the sword, and they shall know that I am the Lord Yahweh." So, and the daughter is really going into the villages and so on and so forth, sub cities of Tyrus, right? Because it wasn't just going to be, if it in the sense of the literal women, it wasn't just going to be the women that were going to be slain. Verse 7, "For thus saith the Lord Yahweh, behold, I will bring upon Tyrus Nebuchadnezzar," or Nebuchadrezzar, which that's how sometimes it's spelled, but it's talking about the same person, "king of Babylon, a king of kings from the north, with horses and with chariots and with horsemen and companies and much people." So now when you look this up, they tell you that, let me see, let's do siege of Tyrus. By Babylon. There we go, siege of Tyre. So right around 586 to 573, as you read, they'll tell you that there's not really much information that was found out or that was kept or recorded about this the siege in particular. But we know from the scriptures basically what the Lord prophesied what the Lord said would happen by the mouth of Ezekiel pretty much is what takes place, or what befalls this region. Okay, so it says here, "The siege of Tyre was waged by Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon for 13 years, from 586 to 573 BC. The siege of Tyre in Phoenicia has a significant connection to the book of Ezekiel, where it was mentioned that the city had fallen to Babylonian forces after a years-long siege." Okay, so now let's go back. And like I mentioned, because this was on basically separated from the mainland, it was harder for nations to actually come against this city of Tyre over here. Anyway, verse 7, "For thus saith the Lord Yahweh, behold, I will bring upon Tyrus Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, a king of kings from the north, with horses, and with chariots, and with horsemen, and companies, and much people. He shall slay with the sword thy daughters in the field, and he shall make a fort against thee, and cast a mount against thee, and lift up the buckler against thee. So basically, he was going to come with his armies and his weapons, and he was going to besiege the city, to take it down, because that's why they would build a fort. They would cast mounts and all of that. And he shall set engines of war against thy walls, i.e. battering rams, right? And with his axes he shall break down thy towers. And how were they actually going to do that? Because when you actually read about the siege, in order to get to this actual land, they actually had to build what they called today it's like a bridge. Like today, when you travel from one location to another over water, you have a bridge, like the George Washington Bridge and so on and so forth. I forgot, I think they called this like a crossway, or let me see what the exact name was. Here. Causeway. Okay, a causeway. It says here, little of what occurred during the siege is known, as ancient sources regarding the siege do not mention much or have been lost. According to accounts by St. Jerome in his commentary on Ezekiel, Nebuchadnezzar II was unable to attack the city with conventional methods, such as battering rams or siege engines, since Tyre was an island city. So he ordered his soldiers to gather rocks and build a causeway from the mainland to the walls of the island, similar to Alexander the Great's strategy in his siege 250 years later. So that's actually what they did, right? They ended up building that, and once they were actually there, then they could actually, lay siege to the city and take it down over time. Verse 10, by reason of the abundance of his horses, their dust shall cover thee. Once again, this is the Lord metaphorically speaking, right? So you can imagine on a battlefield, right? Typically there's like dirt, sand, whatever. When you have horses running, they tend to cause dust to go up into the air by the stomping of their hooves on the ground. And the more horses you have, the greater the dust. All right, so that's basically here metaphorically, that's what it's saying. By the reason of the abundance of his horses, their dust shall cover thee. Meaning he's going to come with a lot of, armies, horsemen, all of that. Thy walls shall shake at the noise of the horsemen, and of the wheels, and of the chariots, when he shall enter into thy gates, as men enter into a city wherein is made a breach. So it emphasizes the size of his army, and it talks about basically what's going to happen when they actually invade. Like as if men who finally made a breach inside of a wall of a city invade that city. They basically just flood it. They rush up in there. With the hooves of his horses shall he tread down all thy streets. He shall slay thy people by the sword, and thy strong garrisons shall go down to the ground. And they shall make a spoil of thy riches, and make a prey of thy merchandise. Because remember, they were also a merchant city, and they did a lot of sea, trade by sea. And they shall break down thy walls and destroy thy pleasant houses, and they shall lay thy stones and thy timber and thy dust, in the midst of the water. Meaning they were gonna break down, basically ravage it. All right, and in the midst of the water, because once again, this city of Tyrus or Tyre was in the Mediterranean. Okay, although it was off the coast of that land, of the mainland, it was still a ways away. And I will cause the noise of thy songs to cease, and the sound of thy harps shall be no more heard. And I will make thee like the top of a rock. Thou shalt be a place to spread nets upon. Thou shalt be built no more, for I, the Lord, have spoken it, saith the Lord Yahweh. So once again, like I mentioned earlier, the Lord is re-emphasizing the point here about how he's going to bring them low. And this was going to happen over a period of time. Now, Nebuchadnezzar did damage, but eventually, after Nebuchadnezzar's time, you had the Greeks that came up against them as well, and then in times after that, you also had some other nations that came up against them. Okay, so they lost that former glory, and that's interestingly enough, that's pretty much almost the case for almost all the ancient nations that were in that region of the Levant. Okay, so it says here, verse 15, thus saith the Lord Yahweh to Tyrus, shall not the isles shake at the sound of thy fall? When the wounded cry, when the slaughter is made in the midst of thee? So basically, when the news of the destruction, of your destruction, comes to them, are they not gonna shake? Are they not gonna be surprised and mourn? And why is that? Because a lot of these either islands or coastal cities depended on Tyrus. Once again, it was a major trade city, okay, or port, or whatever you want to call it. So there was a lot of dependencies on it. Then all the princes of the sea shall come down from their thrones, and lay away their robes, and put off their broidered garments. They shall clothe themselves with trembling, and shall sit upon the ground, and shall tremble at every moment, and be astonished at thee. Meaning that they were going to mourn. So the princes of the sea, like those other Phoenician colonies, or these other regions that were dependent upon Tyre, when they hear, or Tyre, when they hear about this, they were gonna, what it means by come down from their throne and laid away their robes, it's a sign of mourning, right? When you heard devastating news in the ancient world and you would mourn, you would replace your regular garments with that of like sackcloth, right, as it says, and put off their broidered garments, and shall clothe themselves with trembling. That would typically be sackcloth, right? And shall sit upon the ground, and shall tremble at every moment, and be astonished at thee. They're going to be taken back. They're going to be surprised. And they shall take up a lamentation for thee, and say to thee, how art thou destroyed, that was inhabited of seafaring men? Right? Once again, that was basically what they were known for. Okay? And the renowned city, which was strong in the sea, she and her inhabitants, which caused their terror to be on all that haunted. So pretty much anybody that came against it. Now you may say, well, it's a small city off the coast of, or a small island off the coast of, the mainland, but they had a lot of power and influence because of the importance they held, or the position that they held. So it wouldn't really turn out too well for you if you really came against them. Of course, in cases like this, where there was a whole empire that came against him, it was a different story. Verse 18, it says, now shall the isles tremble in the day of thy fall. Yea, the isles that are in the sea shall be troubled at thy departure. For thus saith the Lord Yahweh, when I shall make thee a desolate city, like the cities that are not inhabited, when I shall bring up the deep upon thee, the great waters shall cover thee. Okay, meaning that when the Lord finally brings that destruction upon them, okay, which was continuous, like I said, it happened in the time of Nebuchadnezzar, it happened in the time of Alexander, but there were also subsequent nations that came against that region afterwards, to the point where it's now it's not known as it was before. Okay, and the Lord is likening that onto like this great waters covering it, because physically, right, if there was like a wild storm or something like that, and you had like the waters of the sea that just raged, they could pretty much destroy that region. Okay, so that's why the Lord is making this analogy here. Verse 20, when I shall bring thee down with them that descended into the pit, or that descend into the pit with the people of old time, and shall set thee in the low parts of the earth. Now, this is, in a literal sense, it's like talking about death, right? But it's here analogous to representing how Tyrus was going to be brought down into a low state, similar to how in other scriptures it talks about, like the Lord talked about bringing the city of Capernaum, down to hell. There ain't going to be, the city of Capernaum is not going to be burning in some some actual, realm somewhere like that. Okay, but it's just to represent it being brought down. It says here, set thee in the low parts of the earth, in places desolate of old, with them that go down to the pit, that thou shalt be not inhabited, and I shall set glory in the land of the living. And I will make thee a terror, and thou shalt be no more, though thou be sought for, yea, shalt thou never be found again, saith the Lord Yahweh. Okay, and pretty much this was the judgment that the Lord pronounced, like I said, against the ancient city of Tyrus by the mouth of Ezekiel. However, as we keep on reading, you'll see that there are certain parts that when you read about, it's really symbolic for Esau today. Okay, so some things that you read actually did happen, that the Lord pronounced. It actually did happen to the ancient cities, but there are certain parts that also are prophetic, and you'll be able to tell as you read it. You'll just say that, yeah, this doesn't make sense. It's kind of like certain scriptures that talk about Babylon being destroyed, never to be inhabited again, because there are certain precepts where it talks about Egypt and it's talking about ancient Egypt. But then there are other precepts like Revelation 11 where it talks about Egypt, but that Egypt is really talking about that spiritual Sodom and Egypt is talking about America or Babylon. Okay, just like Isaiah 19 is talking about Babylon. So it's also very important to be able to differentiate, between when it's prophetic, when a certain verse or chapter is prophetic, or when it's historical, or maybe when it's both. Right, it can be applied in both cases. Nevertheless, that's pretty much it for Ezekiel 26. Lord willing, this is edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakha, Kodesh. And until next time, Shalom.